A rising Navy captain spoke with Trump behind closed doors. Hours later, the entire country was debating her words. The sky over Norfolk Naval Station, Virginia, stretched wide and cloudless, the ocean breeze carrying the faint scent of salt and steel. Rows of sailors stood at attention in crisp uniforms, their faces a mix of discipline and curiosity. The visit had been on the calendar for weeks, but anticipation buzzed in the air. Donald Trump was here. The motorcade rolled through the base gates, a caravan of black SUVs slicing through the open tarmac. As the vehicles came to a stop, the press corps moved into position, cameras hoisted, microphones at the ready. The moment the door to the lead SUV swung open, Trump stepped out, exuding the confidence that had long defined his public persona. He adjusted his suit jacket, scanning the crowd before flashing that signature grin. "Great to be here," he said, voice carrying over the hum of activity. "You've got the best sailors in the world, no doubt about it." A polite round of applause followed. Some stood stoic, hands behind their backs, while others exchanged quick glances. Whatever their personal opinions, today wasn't about politics. It was about the military, their military, and the unspoken rule of respecting the chain of command. Rear Admiral Jonathan Rees approached, offering a firm handshake. "Welcome to Norfolk, Mr. President. We appreciate your time." "Absolutely," Trump replied, nodding toward the rows of sailors. "These are the people who keep America strong. We owe them everything." Rees gestured toward a waiting platform. "We'll begin with a tour of the aircraft carrier, then move to the command center for a briefing. After that, you'll have the opportunity to speak with some of our officers." Trump gave a short nod, eyes flicking toward the towering carrier in the distance. "Sounds good. Let's take a look." As they moved toward the dock, the press followed, snapping photos, recording every move. The visit was standard protocol. Shake hands, show support, remind the world that America's military was second to none. But beneath the surface, there was something unspoken in the air. Aboard the USS George H.W. Bush, the group moved through the labyrinth of corridors, passing sailors who stood at attention, their eyes locked forward. The rhythmic clang of boots against metal echoed through the space. It was a scene Trump had witnessed before. Disciplined, precise, unwavering. Then, in the briefing room, after the usual security updates and operational reports, a moment of spontaneity changed everything. Trump leaned back in his chair, tapping a finger against the polished wood table. "So tell me," he said, scanning the officers in the room, "who here's been making waves? Who's the real deal?" A brief pause. Then Captain Dawson's name was mentioned, a young officer barely into her 40s, but already carrying a reputation for tactical brilliance. She was the kind of leader who didn't just follow protocol. She understood the battlefield, the risks, the sacrifices. "She's right outside, sir," an officer said. Trump raised an eyebrow. "Bring her in." The doors opened, and Captain Dawson stepped forward, shoulders squared, eyes steady. Her uniform was immaculate, her ribbons reflecting years of service and sacrifice. She wasn't expecting this, but when she met Trump's gaze, she didn't flinch. Something about her presence shifted the energy in the room. Trump smirked, leaning forward. "Well, well, they say you're the one to watch." Dawson didn't hesitate. "I don't know about that, sir. I just do my job." The room was silent, waiting. Something about this moment, this unexpected collision of worlds, felt different. But no one could have predicted just how far this conversation would go. Captain Dawson stood firm, her expression steady as she faced Trump. The room held a tense sort of stillness, officers watching carefully, the press just outside the door waiting for something worth capturing. She knew how these moments worked. Every word spoken here could be analyzed, picked apart, turned into a headline by the time the sun set. Trump leaned back slightly, assessing her. "How long have you been in?" 18 years, sir," Dawson replied. "That's a long time." He folded his hands on the table. "So, tell me, what's the biggest challenge you've faced as a leader?" A loaded question. She could have played it safe, given a rehearsed answer about strategy, logistics, or international tensions, but something in her gut told her to say what she actually believed. "Earning trust," Dawson said. "As a woman in command, you don't just get respect handed to you. You have to prove yourself, over and over again." The room stayed quiet. Some officers shifted in their seats. Trump's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't interrupt. She continued, her voice calm but firm. Every decision I make is scrutinized more than my male counterparts. If I'm tough, I'm seen as too aggressive. If I take a step back, I'm seen as weak. And that's before we even talk about the pressure of leading sailors who are trained to question authority when it doesn't come from the usual places. Trump let out a short breath, tilting his head. That's interesting. But let me ask you something. Do you think that's changing? Or is the military still stuck in the past? Dawson considered the question. It's changing. Slowly. But change in the military isn't like flipping a switch. It takes time. And it takes leadership willing to push for it. Trump smirked slightly as if amused by her directness. You don't pull punches, do you? I don't have time to. There was a beat of silence, then a few quiet chuckles from the officers at the table. Even some of Trump's aides exchanged glances. It was rare to see someone meet him head-on like this, especially in a setting where most officers measured their words carefully. Trump tapped a finger on the table. Let me tell you something. People don't respect weakness. Never have, never will. You say you have to prove yourself? That's life. You gotta earn it. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes you better than the rest. Dawson met his gaze, unreadable. She knew what he was doing, flipping the narrative, reframing struggle as an advantage, and maybe there was some truth to it. But she also knew that the weight of constantly having to earn it could break people before they ever had the chance to lead. But before she could respond, a voice from the hallway cut through the tension. Sir, the press is waiting. Trump exhaled, standing up. All right, Captain Dawson, I like you. You're sharp. He glanced at the officers in the room. You all could learn a thing or two from her. With that, he turned toward the exit. But Dawson didn't move, because she saw it. The journalist lingering just outside the door, phone in hand, eyes flicking between her and the former president. And she had a gut feeling that this conversation wasn't staying in this room. But she had no idea just how fast the world would react. It started with a single clip, a 7-second snippet, barely enough to tell a full story, but just enough to spark a fire. Trump's voice rang out clearly in the video, the caption typed out in bold letters underneath. People don't respect weakness. Never have, never will. The journalist had recorded the moment just outside the door, cropping out context, leaving only a vague impression of the exchange. The clip hit Twitter first, then spread like wildfire across cable news, blogs, and opinion pages. One camp saw it as Trump reinforcing a hard truth, that respect is earned, not given. Others took it as a dismissal of Dawson's point, a minimization of the real struggles women face in the military. The debate escalated almost immediately. Cable news pounced. CNN aired a panel discussion dissecting every syllable. Is Trump ignoring the institutional biases women like Captain Dawson face? One anchor asked. Meanwhile, Fox News framed it differently. Trump praises a young Navy captain for her toughness. Why is the media twisting his words? By the next morning, the clip was everywhere. Hashtags flooded social media. Weakness isn't an option. # Captain Dawson speaks. # Trump dismisses sexism. The problem? Dawson never said any of those things. She woke up to a storm she never saw coming. Her phone buzzed with unread texts from colleagues, old friends, and even family. Some were supportive. You handled that perfectly. Others, less so. What were you thinking, talking to him like that? She scrolled through Twitter and felt the dizzying weight of it all. Thousands of strangers debating her, dissecting her words, putting opinions in her mouth that she never spoke. And then came the emails, the calls, the requests for interviews. CNN wanted to hear her perspective. Fox wanted her to clarify. Podcasts, blogs, military forums, everyone wanted her to say something. Her inbox felt like a minefield. One email stood out, a message from a retired admiral she once worked under. It was short, direct. Stay quiet, this will pass. It was tempting. If she said nothing, the news cycle would move on, just like it always did. But if she spoke, if she pushed back, she might risk making this bigger than it already was. Her name was now tied to a national debate she never asked for, and she had only hours to decide what to do next. But the world wasn't waiting for her answer. It was already choosing sides. The debate didn't die down, it exploded. News anchors, political commentators, retired military officials, everyone had something to say. The clip played on repeat across different networks, but the interpretations varied wildly. On one side, conservative voices framed Trump's words as a lesson in resilience. "This is what leadership looks like," one host on Fox News argued. "Captain Dawson is clearly a strong officer, and Trump is simply reinforcing that success comes from proving yourself. That's true for everyone, not just women." But on MSNBC, the conversation took a different turn. "This is exactly why women in the military struggle," a former Navy officer said. "We're told to work twice as hard for half the recognition, and when we speak up, we're met with this, just toughen up rhetoric." It wasn't just political pundits weighing in. Veterans, active duty officers, and ordinary citizens joined the conversation. Some took to Twitter to defend Dawson. She didn't even say anything controversial. She spoke her truth, and now she's being dragged into a political mess. Women in the military have to prove themselves constantly. This isn't up for debate. Others sided with Trump. Military service is about results, not feelings. Dawson wouldn't be in her position if she wasn't tough enough to handle it. "What's the problem here? He said she was strong. He's right." The arguments turned heated, personal, relentless. And through it all, Captain Dawson had said nothing. The requests for interviews kept coming. CNN sent a follow-up. "We'd love to have you on to set the record straight." A well-known veteran podcast reached out. "We can give you an unfiltered space to speak." Even the New York Times wanted an op-ed. And then, a call from an unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something told her to answer. "Captain Dawson?" a deep voice said. "This is Senator Paul Grant." She sat up straighter. A sitting U.S. senator calling her directly? "I wanted to commend you," he continued. "The way you handled yourself in that room, impressive." "Thank you, sir," she said cautiously. "I think you have an opportunity here," Grant went on. "If you're willing, I'd like to bring you in for a closed-door discussion on military leadership. There are people in Washington who would benefit from your perspective." Dawson hesitated. This was a different level of exposure. "I appreciate the offer, Senator," she said carefully, "but I never intended to be part of this conversation." Grant chuckled. "Whether you intended to or not, you are. And whether you like it or not, your voice carries weight right now." She gripped her phone tighter. "This could be the start of something bigger," Grant added. "The question is, are you ready to step into it?" But before she could even think about answering, something else happened that changed everything. Captain Dawson sat in her office, phone screen glowing, unread messages stacking up by the minute. The debate had shifted from words to action. Her name was now plastered across opinion columns, think pieces, and political forums. Some praised her as a role model. Others accused her of playing into a divisive conversation. And then the threats started. At first it was just online comments, anonymous accounts calling her weak, ungrateful, saying she was using her gender for attention. But then, an email. "Stay in your lane. You represent the Navy, not your gender. Don't make this political." She exhaled slowly, refusing to react. This wasn't new. Every woman in leadership faced some version of this. But now, the volume had turned up. The Navy's Public Affairs Office finally stepped in. A senior officer knocked on her door. "Captain, we need to talk." She gestured for him to enter. "We've received a significant number of media requests regarding your interaction with the former president," he said, taking a seat. "We're advising you not to engage." Dawson folded her arms. "So, I stay silent? You avoid unnecessary distractions." She looked at him for a long moment. "Am I a distraction?" "That's not what I meant." But it was exactly what he meant. Dawson leaned back, choosing her words carefully. "If I don't speak, people put words in my mouth. If I do, I risk making this bigger than it already is." "That's the reality of it," the officer said, "and I understand that's frustrating. But your responsibility is to the Navy first." She didn't argue. She knew what he wasn't saying. that the Navy didn't want headlines, didn't want controversy, didn't want her to be anything other than an officer who did her job and stayed out of the storm. She nodded, but her mind was already spinning. Could she really sit back and let the world shape her words for her? Then, another email. This one different. A personal note from a young enlisted woman, stationed overseas. Captain Dawson, I just wanted to say thank you. I've had commanding officers tell me to toughen up, to stop expecting things to be fair. But hearing someone like you speak the truth? It means more than you know. Please don't let them silence you. Dawson stared at the screen. Her decision had just gotten a whole lot harder. But before she could decide, another unexpected turn pushed the conversation even further. Captain Dawson thought about ignoring it all, letting the news cycle move on, letting the world argue about her without her input. But the message from that young sailor stuck with her. If she stayed silent, what message did that send to the next generation of officers? The decision was made for her when a leaked internal memo hit the news. A well-known political blog obtained a document from within the Navy, suggesting that the leadership was concerned about how Dawson's remarks were being interpreted. The wording was vague, but the message was clear. Keep this quiet. Make sure she doesn't stir the waters any further. It was exactly the kind of story that reporters loved. Military leadership, public perception, the blurred lines between politics and duty. Within hours, the memo was all over the news. CNN's headline read, "Is the Navy trying to silence Captain Dawson?" Fox countered with, "Leaked memo shows military leadership caving to political pressure." The Pentagon issued a carefully worded statement saying they respected Dawson's service, and that all officers are expected to maintain professionalism in public discourse. Professionalism. A loaded word. Suddenly, it wasn't just about what Dawson had said, it was about whether the military had a culture problem. Former officers, politicians, even celebrities started weighing in. A retired Marine general, "Women in the military have fought for decades to be seen as equals. When they speak out, they shouldn't be punished for it." A conservative commentator, "This is why the military needs to focus on strength, not social issues. We don't need distractions from real threats." A viral TikTok from a young female service member, "Captain Dawson is saying what we've all been thinking. We work twice as hard and still get questioned." And then, Trump spoke again. He was doing a phone interview on a radio show when the host brought up the controversy. "People are making a big deal out of nothing," Trump said. "I thought she was strong. She's clearly a tough woman, a good leader. But you know, this is the problem. Everything gets turned into an argument. Everybody's always looking to be offended." The host laughed. "They want her to be a victim." "Exactly," Trump said. "And she's not. She's a Navy captain. She's tough. Let her do her job." That interview sparked a new wave of reactions. Some took it as a defense of Dawson. Others saw it as dismissing the very real challenges she had pointed out. And through it all, Dawson stayed quiet. Until finally she made a decision. She wasn't going to do a cable news interview. She wasn't going to write an op-ed. She wasn't going to let a journalist filter her words. She sat at her desk, took a deep breath and started typing. A statement, in her own words. But the reaction to her decision would be bigger than she ever imagined. Captain Dawson's statement was short, direct, and impossible to twist. She didn't go on national television. She didn't frame herself as a victim. She simply wrote exactly what she believed. It read, "Leadership is about responsibility, about making decisions under pressure, earning trust, and proving, through action, why people should follow you. That process is different for everyone, but for some the road comes with extra obstacles. That's not an excuse. It's not a complaint. It's just reality. I never sought to be part of a national conversation. I serve because I believe in this country and in the people I lead. My job is to prepare my sailors for the challenges ahead, and that's what I will continue to do. I appreciate the support from those who understand what I was trying to say. To those who disagree, I respect your views. That's the freedom we serve to protect. Now let's move forward." She posted it on her official Navy page. No interviews, no theatrics, just words. Within minutes, the post had thousands of shares. Some praised her for handling it with grace. Others accused her of dodging the real issue. But one thing was clear. She was done letting others define the story for her. The media moved on quickly after that. Other scandals took over the headlines. The internet found new debates, new outrages. But inside the military, her words lingered. Young service members quoted her statement in private conversations. Senior officers referenced it in leadership briefings. And within the ranks, a real discussion had started. Not just about Dawson, but about the invisible pressures that shaped careers, opportunities, and perceptions. Months later, she was back to work, away from the spotlight. One day, walking through the ship's corridors, a young lieutenant stopped her. "Captain," he said, hesitating, "I just wanted to say, I saw how you handled everything. A lot of us did. And it meant something." Dawson nodded, offering a small smile. "We all have a responsibility to leave things better than we found them." And with that, she kept walking. Because leadership wasn't about headlines. It was about what happened long after the cameras were gone. The loudest voices don't always define the truth. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is own your story and keep moving forward. If you appreciated this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.